This is really stupid and reckless.
Yeah, that's what I think too. Stupid and reckless. Now, just stop. I'm not calling you stupid and reckless. I'm not saying if you've done things like this that you are stupid and reckless. I'm just saying the actions are. There is no need to use homemade elevated work platforms and homemade personnel baskets. Absolutely none. And no, I couldn't afford to buy the proper device is not an excuse.
Yeah, it's not a very good excuse.
Absolutely, it does not excuse improper work, unsafe work, dangerous work, or unlawful work. Not at all. Manufactured personnel baskets or manufactured elevated work platforms can be used in a lot of jurisdictions. However, they should be an alternative. They shouldn't be used where erected scaffolding or another safer method is available. They kind of become a last resort, but they can be used. And the key word here is manufactured, not homemade. We're going to look at 3 reasons why homemade elevated work platforms and homemade personnel baskets shouldn't be used. Besides the fact that they're often illegal or unlawful in most jurisdictions.
It's against the rules.
And possibly contributing to 2 of the top 3 mechanisms of injury in workplace incidents. By saying that, I mean falling from a height or being struck by or struck against something. In most cases, they're improperly designed and improperly made for their purpose and for the job. Well-intended, but ill-conceived and improperly or poorly implemented. By saying that, what I mean is most jurisdictions require a professional engineer to design and certify an elevated work platform or personnel basket. In saying this, what I mean is most manufacturers will retain a professional engineer to design and certify the device that they're going to make. Once it's designed, there'll also be load ratings and other ratings that are either stamped on it or placed on it with another label. So professional engineers have to be behind the design and specifications behind an elevated work platform or a personnel basket. The other thing is, when they're homemade, they're usually without the safeguards that most manufactured devices will have. For example, guardrails. What more can I say? Well, I can say this. Have a look at this picture. A person has made the attempt to put a guardrail up, but there's a couple of problems here. There's no mid-rail, and there's no specification available and no rating for the horizontal force that these guardrails can withstand. Most jurisdictions have a specification for guardrails and how much horizontal force that they can withstand. Once again, see point 1 with a professional engineer. Now, the other thing is most jurisdictions will require some sort of fall protection anchors or fall restraint anchors to be installed on the elevated work platform or in the personnel basket to prevent the worker from being ejected. So once again, any fall restraint anchor has to have a load rating on it. This is usually designed by a professional engineer. So once again, see point 1, a professional engineer has to be involved. Second point for the reason why you shouldn't be using these things is that there's usually an absence of written procedures. If you're going to be working where hazards are present, there should be written procedures on the safe work. And often working at heights with elevated work platforms or personnel baskets, they often include written procedures on pre-use inspections, also a pre-use lift, walk-arounds, also how do you tag the devices being out of service or what constitutes tagging it as out of service. Beyond that, there's many other things that written procedures should include. And if you're interested, by all means, leave me a comment and maybe I'll look at doing another video on that. But one of the other things that written procedures have to include is emergency processes. Stick with me and I'll talk about those towards the end of the video.
You should stick around.
Now, because there's no written procedures, number 3 is usually a lack of training and a lack of certification. When I've investigated incidents where training has been required or specialized certification or both, and they're absent, that's usually been found as a contributing factor to the workplace incident taking place, or occurring, if you will. So honestly, a lack of training and a lack of certification are big contributors to workplace incidents. Usually when I see homemade devices, it usually also is indicative that there's no training and no certification. As I said, some other considerations for you to think about. One is, of course, written procedures on the emergency processes. Most jurisdictions for workers working at height require some written procedures for the evacuation and rescue of those workers should they become imperiled. And what I'm talking about is how you're going to get them down from there. And so you have to have a written procedure in place. A lot of times people will say, well, I'm just going to call the fire department. By all means, you go ahead, you just call the fire department. But make sure you check with your authority having jurisdiction, because they might require a written agreement in place with the local fire department. And if you have a written agreement in place and the local fire department does perform a rescue, by all means, they will include in their written report what they rescued the worker from. And if that means it's a homemade elevated work basket, then you know what? There's going to be an official record of that. Just a thought. The other thing to consider is a lot of times personnel baskets might not be permitted in the jurisdiction you're working in. Some jurisdictions require that the elevated worker have control of the device that's doing the lifting for the personnel basket. So make sure that you check with your jurisdiction before you start working at heights, and by all means implement a safe work plan before you start working at heights. And that will include a hazard assessment and all of the controls implemented so that you can work safely. And what I mean by that is just have a look at this video here. Now, obviously, what can I say? There was no plan in place, but beyond that, it was foolish and reckless. And the reason why I say that is because that person just taught a child that it's okay to work unsafely. That's terrible, and that's setting a terrible example. Now, a lot of times workers will feel that they're forced into these situations. They're forced to work on a pallet that's suspended on a forklift fork, or they're forced to work in a slapped together, homemade personnel basket. You don't have to, not at all. In many jurisdictions, workers have the right to refuse unsafe work, so make sure that you're aware of it and check with your jurisdiction. In Canada here, workers have the right to refuse unsafe work. I know they do as well in the United States. So I've made a few videos on refusing unsafe work and worker rights, so have a look at them up here and let me know your thoughts. But until we see each other again, do me a favor. Not like that guy getting lifted up onto the roof by his kid, but think about safety, talk about safety, but lead by example and do safety wherever you are. Take care. Bye for now.